Hey everyone, Nigel here, and welcome to Crime Zone. It's safe to say that when most people hear the words American serial killer, names like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and Jeffrey Dahmer are among the first to come to mind. Owing to a combination of their brutality and their seemingly endless focus as the subjects of true crime books, television, and movies, these killers have arguably become some of the most thoroughly examined figures in American history. Though these infamous killers have no doubt earned their reputation in the culture, serving as reminders of the most horrifying depths of human behavior, what's perhaps even more disturbing are the many serial killers most of us never even knew existed. Whether they were before our time or simply didn't receive the same amount of notoriety for some other reason, we can't be sure. But there's no denying that their crimes were every bit as dark, despite failing to leave the same lasting mark on our collective memories. With that being said, here is our list of 7 terrifying American serial killers you've probably never heard of. Robert Lee Yates was responsible for the murders of more than 18 women in Spokane, Washington, between the years of 1975 and 1998, all of whom were sex workers. Unlike many of the names on this list, there is very little available about Yates' early life that would seem to foreshadow his violent crimes to come. In fact, his reputation as an unassuming middle-class family man is likely one of the reasons he was able to get away with his crimes for as long as he did. However, despite his family man reputation, Yates was anything but. While leading his twisted double life, he even bizarrely buried the body of one of his victims outside the bedroom window of the family home while his wife was sleeping there. Though his death sentence was eventually commuted to life in prison, he is currently serving a 408-year prison sentence at the Washington State Penitentiary. Like many of the iconic serial killer stories you're probably familiar with, Carol Cole's crimes began with an incredibly troubled childhood. From an early age, Cole suffered both extreme emotional and physical abuse at the hands of his mother Vesta, including frequent beatings, being dressed as a girl against his will, and reportedly being forced to watch his mother's sexual encounters with various men. Cole's abuse manifested in many antisocial behaviors as a teen and young adult, such as theft, alcoholism, and arson, but the most damaging outcome was the unshakable hatred he developed towards women. From 1971 to 1980, Cole strangled at least 15 women to death, though he admitted to investigators he may have killed many more, with some estimates ranging as high as 35. He is also said to have partially cannibalized the remains of one of his victims. Cole was executed via lethal injection in Nevada in 1985, a sentence he actively protested in favor of when the ACLU and anti-death penalty advocates had tried to commute his sentence to life the previous year. Given the sensational nature of Robert Hansen's crimes and the multiple films and television episodes they inspired, it's hard to pinpoint exactly why he's relatively unknown among American serial killers. Responsible for the murders of at least 17 women and the rapes and assaults of many more, Hansen terrorized Anchorage, Alaska between 1971 and 1983, kidnapping his victims and often flying them to remote locations where he would hunt them down with a Ruger semi-automatic rifle and a knife. Amazingly, even after the escape of one of his victims, 17-year-old Cindy Paulson, Hansen wasn't immediately caught, despite being identified by Paulson and interviewed by the Anchorage Police Department. It was only after a detective with the Alaska State Troopers who was investigating the discovery of several other bodies in the Anchorage area got involved in the case and reached out to the FBI that a criminal psychological profile was produced, and Hansen was later arrested and convicted for his crimes. Perhaps the only thing more disturbing than Arthur Shawcross's 14 murders is that almost all of them might have been prevented had he not received early parole while serving time for the 1972 murders of a young boy and girl in his hometown of Watertown, New York. Instead, Shawcross served only 14 of his 25-year manslaughter sentence, going on to earn the nickname the Genesee River Killer when he murdered an additional 12 women between 1988 and 1989, shortly after his release from prison. Shawcross was described by psychiatrists as a schizoid psychopath, something that might explain a few of the inconsistent and more outlandish claims he made over the years involving cannibalizing parts of his victims and of beheading women in the jungles of Vietnam while serving in the army, even though he reportedly never saw combat. Much like with the Genesee River killer Arthur Shawcross, as many as 22 women in Riverside County, California might not have been murdered if William Suff hadn't received early parole after serving only 10 years of a 70-year sentence for the killing of his 2-month-old daughter in 1974. If that wasn't horrifying enough, upon his release in 1984, Suff would begin a gruesome killing spree that reportedly included strangulation, torture, and mutilation until his arrest in 1992. He was ultimately convicted of the death of 12 women and the attempted murder of one other in 1995 and sentenced to death, but is still awaiting execution. Though it's not uncommon for serial killers to be suspected of further crimes, or to claim responsibility for a number of unconfirmed killings, what is unusual is for that range to extend into the hundreds of possible victims, as was the case with Charles Cullen. Indeed, the wildly varying estimates of Cullen's victims lies in the way that he was able to conduct his murders. As a nurse, he was able to administer fatal doses to patients between the years of 1988 and 2003, remaining undetected for so long in part because of his use of insulin and heart medications such as digoxin, instead of painkillers that would have been more easily noticed. Cullen received a total of 18 consecutive life sentences for his crimes, making him ineligible for parole until the year 2403. Paul John Knowles, also known as the Casanova Killer, is thought to have been responsible for between 20 and 35 gruesome murders in the single year of 1974. Crimes that also included multiple rapes, burglaries, and at least one instance of necrophilia. Adding to his senseless and terrifying killing streak was the seeming incapability of law enforcement to keep up with him. Knowles began his rampage by picking the lock of his cell in July of 1974 after an arrest for the stabbing of a bartender in Florida, and successfully evaded police for months, once narrowly escaping by reportedly brandishing a sawed-off shotgun at officers. Police finally narrowed in on Knowles for real in November of 1974, but not before a days-long chase that began with the murder of the first officer to pull him over. Even after his capture, Knowles refused to go down without a fight, and was shot and killed while in transport in December of the same year after trying to wrestle the pistol off of one of the state troopers in the vehicle. That brings us to the end of our list. Let us know if you did indeed recognize any of the names of these serial killers, and feel free to share any of your other thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. Thank you for watching.